I'm
Okay.
not. Oh, there you go.
All
So
right.
I'm not looking for notoriety. I just want to, because the older I get, the more you think about the next life,
Uh-huh.
right? We're only a couple years apart in age, right? So um, you don't feel like you're 25 anymore when you get up in the morning.
The body knows it's not 25 years old anymore. Well, why don't you start by telling me a little bit about yourself?
Well, yeah, I was born in 61. I came from immigrant parents, probably like you did.
No,
Uh,
no.
oh, you didn't. Oh, you're multi more.
My great-grandparents came over at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century.
Oh, okay, okay. Well, that's nice. My mother's aunt and uncle, they came here in 98, 1898.
Okay.
But we've never ever contacted those people. Don't even know who they are, right? But
But
like
your
my
but your
mom,
parents were immigrants.
they're immigrants after the war, right?
Yeah.
Holland was reduced to rubble, especially where my dad lived was Rotterdam, and that was bombed
Yeah.
out,
Yeah.
right? So a huge influx of immigrants came in
Yeah.
the late 40s, early 50s.
Yeah.
And I immigrated, or I did. My parents immigrated to Edmonton,
Yeah.
right? And as all immigrants, that's funny because my in-laws, they're also Dutch. They immigrated, but to southern Alberta, and they worked in the beet farms, picking
Okay.
sugar beets,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
right? And that's what happened back then is all those immigrants, or most of them, were sponsored,
Yeah.
right? So they came with very humble beginnings.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm the youngest of four boys in the
Okay.
family, and
So
we're
what did your
all.
father do?
My dad, like when he immigrated to a town that's just north of Edmonton called Barhead,
Yeah.
and I was in 54 or 52, he was there.
Okay.
Well, Barhead didn't have plumbing till 54.
Okay.
So his first job was emptying outhouses because everybody had an outhouse behind their house,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
His first job for the town was to empty those outhouses
Yeah.
onto a horse-drawn wagon. So, how many immigrants would stoop that low today, right?
Well, I don't know. Immigrants do a lot of dirty jobs. They
Well, they
still
do
do.
dirty jobs, but I don't know about that dirty, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a pretty dirty job. Actually, didn't Barhead and Westlock, didn't they share a pastor?
Uh,
Because
that's a good.
my father got a call there.
Okay.
He didn't. He went to Patterson, New Jersey instead. But when he was in
Oh, good for
seminary,
him.
leaving seminary, that was so I could have been Albertan. So
Oh, wow.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. We give you another chance.
So your father
But
started doing that. But he didn't keep doing that. I mean, raise
no.
four kids. You're gonna have to make some money.
Well, that's just it, and that's the thing, they moved to Edmonton quickly because that's where the jobs are, the big
Yeah.
city,
Yep.
right? So they moved there pretty quick. And he got a job with the University of Alberta. And he landed in a field that they did soil surveying, right?
Okay.
They like different ecosystems. So then he got a job with the Alberta government, and he retired in 87 after 35 years or so of service there. So, and I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like I live in Rocky Mountain House now. I moved here when I was 21, and it was a culture shock being a
Hmm.
city boy coming to a country town
Hmm.
because they roll up the sidewalk at 5 o'clock, right? So it took me a long time to get used to that. Now, when like we make few trips to the city now,
Yeah.
um, I you couldn't literally pay me enough to live there.
Yeah. Really?
This life is just so awesome,
Yeah.
right?
So you went to a Christian Reformed church growing up?
Yes, Christian Reformed Church. We went to Maranatha in Beverly,
Okay.
right? You're familiar with Maranatha. They seem to be causing a lot of trouble lately. But we split from them. My dad did. I was too young to care at that time. I was a young teenager. So
Mhm.
really, okay, we're going to a different church.
Yeah.
We started another CRC called Bethel,
Okay.
and um, and then my dad got a promotion to be in the director for the eastern slopes of the Rockies here.
Okay.
So he had to move to Rocky for that.
Okay.
So he moved in 81. I came here in 82 because that was the first, um, I guess you could say, recession. It was hard to find jobs at that time.
Okay.
Right. So, well, my mom and dad are there. Let's move in. Right.
Yeah.
Well, and then I met my wife, whose father and mother were part of the CRC church here in
Okay.
Rocky.
Yeah.
And, it's funny. I knew at the moment I saw her, I knew she was going to be my wife. Do you ever get that epiphany?
Yeah, yeah, but it's not uncommon at all, really. A lot of people, if you talk to them, that the first time you see that person, you're like, and yeah, for me too, kind of. I
Yeah.
didn't say at that moment that she was going to be my wife, but I noticed her right away, and I still remember seeing her for the first time. So that's not an
Right.
uncommon thing.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And the first time I ever saw her was in church. Right? So we knew that was the way to go, right? Or I knew that was the way to go.
How big was the church back then?
Well, I'm coming to that in my story as well. The church
Okay.
here was quite large. They had two services in the morning
Oh,
because there
wow.
was so many people.
Yeah.
And but I would say in the mid 90s, they started to introduce, and see, that's where, like you mentioned on your videos, you're a moderate, right? There's nothing in my entire body that is in moderation, right? I'm one way or the other. I'm
Okay.
sorry, that's who I am, right?
Okay.
So the moderates wanted, musical instruments.
Yeah.
The organ was no longer good,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
So then the conservative people, we started a new church back then, and we started off in the Christian school in their gymnasium
Okay.
until we got the funds together to build a new church.
With an organ.
Pardon me?
With an organ for your new church.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Organ and a piano. Can you imagine that?
Well,
We
that's
got
good.
two instruments. Mind you, on certain days, you got some kids that play the clarinet, and
Yeah.
just for fun,
Yeah.
and that's perfectly fine, eh? But I mean, um, in your videos, you're talking to many people about moderation or moderates and lefts, liberals, conservatives. We get that talk up here as well. We are a very conservative church. We don't have women in office here.
Mhm.
But that's a point that I want to come to because I got all my points all here
Oh,
on
okay.
paper here,
Good.
eh? So
Good.
I got all kinds of stuff here.
All right.
So, we called the pastor who had just immigrated. See, in this area, there's a lot of people that immigrated from South Africa after apartheid fell.
Oh.
So we have lots of South Africans here. They're all white people, by the way, but it don't matter. But they're from South Africa,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So, and most of them are professional people. A lot of them are doctors,
Hmm.
right? So, so we called Nick Walmerans is his name, and he's from South Africa. We've had him over 20 years now,
Okay.
and he's getting, he's pushing 70, right? He's talking about retirement, and he brought that up at the last council meeting, and but I said, hey, I wish you're physically fit. So, and he said too, yeah, I will preach until God takes me home, right? So that's good for me because we hear the word every Sunday.
Okay.
Like the morning service is a regular because that's the busy service, right?
Yep. Yep.
But the evening is Heidelberg Catechism.
Yep.
Right. And we are one of the only churches left in Alberta that has two services.
I believe it. I believe it.
Right.
That used to be that, I grew up, there was always the norm, and it was the Heidelberg Catechism at night, but there's
Yep.
not too many churches left that do that. No, that's right.
No, and that's sad. And that's, and those are all the reasons why we are talking today. I mean, you have a wonderful platform, and I thank God that because you're the only CRC YouTuber I know of. Maybe there's more, I don't know. But it's
There's a
good.
few others, but yeah, I pretty much probably do more than anybody else.
Right. For the last 30 years, I had my own trucking company, right? So the early years, I spent a lot of time in the States. Probably 90% of my trucking life was in the USA. And, now that I'm retired, I retired just before COVID, which was an act of God to said, sell your truck.
Yeah. Timing
Right.
was good.
Yeah, and so that worked out really well. But the downside is I have too much free time,
Mm.
so I'm watching YouTube now,
Uh-oh.
right?
You
And
can't
well, not
necessarily
all the
trust
time.
who you see on there.
Well, that's just it. There are some really good guys on there,
Yeah.
right? So, I don't know how you feel about like John MacArthur. I mean, he's a good Presbyterian, but he's a Presbyterian, right?
Is he? I thought
Yeah,
he's
he is Presbyterian.
non-denominational.
Well, okay, yeah, he maybe started Presbyterian, right? Because he's a Calvinist. He's obviously a Calvinist, eh? But there are some good ones on there, I mean, and that's the difference between all the denominations that I find. There's such small differences that keep us apart,
Hmm.
right? The actual truth of the Bible and the doctrine is all bang on the same. There's some variance while you want to baptize an adult, and we do our children. Okay, some little differences that I don't think are a make or break situation, right? But that's funny. In my last classes meeting, they usually break you up into groups, and you sit around a table and you throw out ideas
What
of what
classes are you a part of? Is your church part of?
Alberta North.
Alberta North. Okay.
Yeah, and one of our guys was at your at the synod here last time. The guy with the frizzy long hair, and he's a liberal. That we all know that. But I was stunned because we got to talking. I don't know how we got onto the conversation, but I happened to mention, CRC are Dutch people predominantly. Lutherans are German. Presbyterians are Scottish. United is English. And these people had no idea of that. They're like, what? So, what are they teaching people today?
Who's they, and what can you
Delegates.
be more specific?
They were delegates.
Oh, they were
What do you,
delegates. Okay.
yeah, delegates at the table, right? Which we all throw out
Oh,
different.
okay. Delegates at the table at classes when you were,
Right, at classes.
and
Sorry.
but they were probably ministers, elders, and deacons, though. There'd be
That's
some
correct.
of the three. Okay.
That's
And
correct.
so you mentions this, and that comes as revelation to people.
Yes.
The historical, basically, CRC comes from Dutch immigrants, many Lutherans, well, German immigrants, also Norwegian immigrants,
Yeah.
because those Norwegian countries, Norway, Scandinavian countries, very Lutheran. Obviously, Scots Presbyterian,
Yeah.
and then United. Well, yeah, Canada's history, of course. You still have you have a king, so.
Well, unfortunately. He's not my king, actually, but whatever. I mean, but that's the thing with Alberta. I mean, we are in Alberta, we're called the Texas North. We have the same geography type. Our road structures are built the same. And the people, of course, are ultra conservative, right? The big cities are starting to turn more left, but the rural community, just like in the United States, it's all conservative, right? So, and that's probably inevitable that happens, right? Like,
Why?
what do you think?
Why do you think that's inevitable?
Well, when you get too many people together, uh, nobody has a concrete foundation. So, hey, that idea sounds good. That idea sounds good. So they try to mold this into a big Mod Podge, right? And it never works, right? I mean, history. I mean, the Old Testament. I love the Old Testament because it's, um, it's, uh, you know, results of your life. The Israelites, when they started worshiping false gods, then the Babylonians came and the Assyrians came and this and that came, right? So it's a good lesson tool for me, at least. Other people maybe don't give it a second thought, Dave, but that's what I see in it, right?
So you're at classes and you're noticing that the other people at your table haven't sort of figured out the national heritage of these different denominations that are around.
They did not acknowledge that they knew that.
Okay. And
right?
so your takeaway from that was,
Well, if you don't have, like I said, if you don't have a solid foundation, where you came from, that isn't that the main questions of life. Where you come from, where are you going, what are you doing here?
that's kind of what I started with you. Yeah.
Yeah, so but they didn't seem to um well, they didn't say, oh, they did say, oh, really? I didn't know that, right? At least a couple of them did. The others were silent, right? So, but
What was the little getting into groups for at that classes meeting? Was that just for lunch, or did you have a discussion element of the classes meeting you had to do?
No, yeah, we had discussions. Like I don't remember because I didn't write it all down. I don't have because I've been to 3 classes in my life, and the first one I will tell you, it turned me off because I walked in the door and 50% of the delegates were women. And I'm not anti-woman. My wife, she is the director for all the administration staff in the entire province.
Wow.
She's a very smart, capable woman. Not a problem. Talking about your faith and your life with God, that's a man's domain. The way I read the Bible, right? It's not that women don't have a part. They do have a part. But as far as teaching and instructing, that should be a man's domain, right? And that brings me to another point with women in office. We don't have women in office, but we had to downscale our consistory because not enough men are willing to stand up. So the women have to do it now. And we've
How
seen
big
that
is your church? On an average Sunday, what's your attendance like? Any guess?
Yeah, I would say 150 average people.
Okay. And what do most of the people at your church do for a living?
A lot are farmers.
Okay.
A lot work in the oil patch.
Okay.
Right. So they have shift work.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that. There's no academics here. Right. This is not an academic mecca.
Okay.
Right. It's a mecca of people that work with their hands.
Yeah.
Right. That's what we have here.
So you're downsized your council. How big is your council because you couldn't find enough candidates for your council? How big is your council right now?
Well, we had 6 elders and 4 deacons.
Okay.
And we're going to keep the number of deacons, but we're downsized now to 5 elders.
Okay.
But we have a lot of people in the congregation, and that's another topic we'll probably get to, that don't go regular to church anymore.
Okay.
You might see them. We have bigger attendance on Lord's Supper days.
Okay.
On those Sundays.
Yeah.
The rest of the time, it dwindles. And a lot of that is because of the oil and gas. It's a lot of shift work here.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So not many people have a 9-to-5 job.
Okay.
Right. So, like my youngest son, he's a Red Seal electrician, and he works like 7 days on and then he gets 7 days off. Right. So there's a lot of variance in the different type of shifts that we have. Right. So, you can't make it to church every Sunday. Right. So, but yeah, it's, it was depressing for me because my dad was always an outspoken elder in the church. Right. And always part of that. He taught catechism, so on and so forth. I don't know if that's, maybe a good model that I model myself after. because he's outspoken like I am. You know, it's there's a really, in my mind, there's a right way and a wrong way to do everything. And the last classes, I finally took the microphone, and that was during the before the synod of 23, when they were talking about the homosexual business and so on and so forth. There were people standing up, and they were saying, I think, and I had enough of that. So I stood up and I said, I want to talk to people who know, not
Mm,
people who think.
mm,
And people from the homosexual side, they were upset with that, right? Because it's not about what you think. Who cares what you think in actuality, right? Because I view, we talked about this in our consistory as well, and that's what I see in our church and your other videos with other people. With the Presbyterians have a very hierarchy,
mhm,
right, and very judicial type. In my mind, Christ, the Christian faith is a dictatorship. Christ is the head. He appoints pastors, elders, and deacons to uphold his laws, not to come up with new ones, to uphold his laws, right? And that's the thing that my pastor and we have a lot of discussions about that, and I don't hold any ill will against anyone. That's never been in me, right? I try to hopefully put the right seed in to get you thinking, right? That's my motive, is to get people thinking, right? But God does the work. We just sow the seed, right? And it's uh yeah, it's the like I say, the older I get, the more it concerns me,
mm.
because there is a great falling away,
Yeah.
probably in your church as well.
Yeah. Well, it's the numbers in the Christian Reformed Church have declined quite a bit. When in it was, I don't remember when it was, but I remember my father. So my grandfather, actually, both my father and grandfather were pastors. My grandfather, for a time, was a pastor in Owen Sound, Ontario, when a lot of
Oh,
the
wow.
immigrants were coming from the
Yeah,
Netherlands.
yeah, yeah.
And he was fluent in Dutch and Frisian. But
Can you speak Dutch?
what's me?
Yeah.
No,
Well, I
no.
can still speak it, even though I was born here.
Well, did your parents speak it in the house?
Well,
Well, that's why you can speak it.
that's right. That's right.
My parents didn't speak it in the house, so I
I
didn't get a
learned my
chance to
first
learn it.
English in grade one.
But I remember, in the 1980s, the Christian Reformed Church wanted to sort of get it to 400,000.
Right,
And now I think we're probably, I haven't looked at the numbers lately, we're probably around 200,000 now. So we're about half the size. The Christian
right,
Reformed Church is about half the size of what it was in the 1980s, probably. And the average age would be quite a bit older. There's a lot that
right.
goes into that, but
And what do you think the reason for that is?
I think there are a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, the baby boom is past. People are not having near as many children. Once a church gets older, so the percentage of people are beyond childbearing years, then you're really going to have a slide in terms of numbers, because you get fewer and fewer people who are actually having children. There have been many in the younger generation that have walked away from the faith.
Yeah,
And I think that, especially in the Christian Reformed Church, is a really break when, when we were going up, there was a lot of, did you go to Christian school or public school?
grade 1 to 12.
Yeah, yeah. So kids went to Christian school. We tended to marry within the Christian Reformed Church. I mean, so there was
Yeah,
a sense when we were growing up that that this would just continue. And even in my own church, there's really nobody in my church, right, of all of the people that are, say, my age. So this church was organized in 1963, the year I was born. So um, of that whole generation of the children of the founders of this church, who are my age, really only one of them, sometimes two. The other one comes even less regularly than the one. That entire generation is not present in the church. And I think part of what people assumed was that that would continue. Now, there's a lot of different factors in that. I think in North America, people are mobile. They move around a lot. And so I don't live anywhere near where I grew up. But again, it was weird because I was a preacher's kid, and my father moved around a lot when he was young. My father, not so much. He only had worked in two churches, but I think there are a lot of factors why the world has changed, and that has meant that especially Christian Reformed churches in urban areas have changed dramatically, whereas Christian Reformed churches in more rural areas and towns and agricultural areas have not changed as much. And so in my classes in Central California, I'd say we might have some, we're not sort of like Texas, but Central California is interesting in that we've got some rural communities like Ripon and Escalon and Visalia that have dairy and nut trees and things like that. Those churches will tend to be more agricultural dairy type churches that have been traditional for the Christian Reformed churches. But then urban churches like in the San Francisco Bay Area, those churches, when I came 27 years ago, those churches were still doing okay, but they had already peaked and were in decline. When I grew up in northern New Jersey, a very urban area, the area was bustling with big Christian Reformed churches, a lot of, full Christian schools, all of that. Today, my guess is that area is probably less than a quarter of the number of Christian Reformed people in that area as there were when I was growing up, and quite a bit older. So the Holland home is plenty full, but the Christian schools have survived by attracting other families, let's say, of non-Reformed, usually conservative evangelical churches. So there have been a ton of changes in the Christian Reformed Church over the last 40 years.
Now, has your Christian schools, are they subsidized by the government at all?
Not in the United States, no.
Okay, because here they made a law. Well, if you're getting our money, you do our curriculum.
Yeah, they fought for that in the U.S., but they never succeeded.
Oh, they did.
So the
Oh,
Christian
good.
schools are 100% funded. It used to be, again, when I was growing up, they had like booster clubs, so the churches would try to subsidize the schools. Today, it's mostly parents, which is why, with the downturn in numbers in the Christian Reformed Church, many of those schools, like we don't have one in Sacramento, but Whitensville, Massachusetts, where my mother lives, and where a good number of my cousins live, the Christian school is flourishing, but it's flourishing because people want an alternative from the public school. So then even just compared to when I went to school as a kid, just a small element from the Christian Reformed churches. The rest are either from other Christian churches in the area or even from non-Christian homes. So
Right.
again, the picture has changed dramatically.
Yeah, yeah. Well, things always change over time, right? Because I know my dad was saying, years and years ago, that when the immigrants came all over in the early 50s, late 40s, they had a conundrum. They had to decide what to build first, a
Yeah.
church or a Christian school.
Yeah.
So they hold both of them in the highest regard,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And it's
And
amazing what those immigrants did in terms of building. I mean,
yeah,
they gave and sacrificed for the school and the church in a really
yeah,
dramatic way. It was quite impressive.
absolutely, absolutely. And my kids, my two boys, we in Rocky, we have Christian school that's 1 to 9 or K to 9, whatever you want to say.
Okay.
But the high school is public school.
Okay.
And that's when my kids started to fall away because they come in contact with people that you believe that old fashioned stuff and all.
Yeah.
So right there's an issue there. And I was lucky I went to Christian high school as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our church still has a collection for the local Christian school.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So we
Yep.
still keep that up. Right.
Yep. 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 Yep.
So I have a story about Ripon, California.
Sure.
There was a time in my life that I was there every weekend at
Really?
the Flying J in Ripon, California.
Yeah. 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 I know just where it is.
I
Yeah.
spent a lot of time there. Well, that was the problem because I was not a team. I was a solo driver. So if you delivered your load in California on a Thursday or a Friday, you're doomed till the following Wednesday because they service all the team drivers first,
Okay.
right? To get the loads there like
Yep.
real quick, right?
Yep.
So the single guys get the scraps that fall off the master's table,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's true. So,
So
so you're watching these changes in the church and you're going to classes. And I mean, what do you think's coming down the road? I know there's a lot of talk in the Christian Reformed Church now. After 2022 and 2023, the same-sex marriage issue, I think, is settled in the denomination. That's quite sure that's not going to change. But there's some talk about maybe the Canadian church splitting off from the church in the United States. There's talk of the progressive churches leaving. What do you think's coming down the road?
there's always chatter, right? That's inevitable. A lot of chatter, and there is no benefit to splitting our two churches, right? U.S. and America and Canadian. There's no benefit to that in my mind, right? So, we as a church, our consistory, we have talked about URC, right? Because we're glad that Synod decided against the homosexual thing. Like we're glad about that because it's obviously not biblical, right? And and that's I think back to in Genesis the Tower of Babel. Why did God confuse the languages? Because everybody was getting two together and coming up with grandiose ideas, right? I see that same thing now. You have to disperse the people to slow that process down, right? And I see that here. Some of those synod videos that I've watched. Inclusiveness. Different ethnic backgrounds. There's not an issue with that in my mind. The issue is when you try to change my doctrine, right? We are a confessional church, right? Heidelberg Catechism, Belgian Confession, Canons of Dort.
Yeah.
That's what we subscribe to.
Yeah.
Anything other than that, don't want to hear about it, right? So if you come in, as a Lutheran, why would you try to make my church a Lutheran church? Why would you try to make my church a Presbyterian or a non-denominational no, we're CRC. That's who we are. They talk a lot lately on the news and that about Christian nationalism. And my question is, so what's wrong with that?
Well,
Right?
I mean, unlike the United States, you actually have a state church, don't you? I mean, you have a king who's supposed to be defender of the faith.
All that stuff is in mouth only, right? So a lot of that stuff, like I wish, I had been born in the US because I don't like the parliamentary system we have in Canada. It gets nothing done, right? And it's all you see that in the States too. The people with the money make the rules, and that hasn't changed anywhere, right? So, but at least there's more checks and balances in the American system, whereas we don't have that in Canada, right? And we don't have a right to protect ourselves or our property. The king, he will provide your protection. Well, you tell an intruder, hang on, let me call 911, just wait, no, you can't have that, right? So there's difference in the system. And here we do a lot of social programs, which nobody thinks about that we actually have to pay for. That money doesn't drop out of heaven to pay all these, special interest groups. It comes out of taxpayers' pockets,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And nobody seems to think about that, right? And you know, yeah, it's frustrating. And Albertans, a lot of Albertans are very American in thought
Yeah.
because we're neighbors and we do a lot of trade between the two countries, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it I don't see. I think it probably like a person who converts to Christianity, generally as a rule, it's not always the case, but you have to hit rock bottom,
Hmm.
right? You have to, like my dad always said too, because he came in the 50s, the churches were full back then.
Hmm.
Why? Because people didn't make much money.
Yeah.
My dad's salary in 1954, I believe, was $3,500 a year, right? So people didn't have money for RVs and boats and quads, side by sides. They didn't have money for that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They needed God more, is
Yeah.
what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, when you're too affluent, you don't need God as much,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because we can do it on our own,
Yeah.
right? That's the
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
But you know, and that the last classes too, the uh, the chairman, he's a pastor in one of our churches, and he came right out and said, "I don't know what to believe anymore." And
Uh,
you are a shepherd of a church.
well, what did he say that about?
The homosexual issue, the LGBT
Oh,
alphabet
okay.
thing.
Okay.
He didn't know what to think about that anymore. And at that moment, I thought to myself, you know what? This is turning into a club and not the governing body of the church.
Hmm.
It's a club. And it's always the same people at the microphone. You ever notice that when you go to it's the
I'm
same
usually one of them in my classes, so it's usually the pastors, but you're right. You're right.
yeah,
It's
but if
always
you
the
know what
same
you're
one.
talking about, okay, that's a different matter. But these guys come up there and they just start spouting all kinds of um, you know, again, what I think, right? Not what you believe, right? What I think. So I see uh, no authority there.
Hmm.
That's the impression I walk away from. There's
Hmm.
no authority, right? You lay down the law, like that's unfair of me to say, because in Holland, when you turn 18, you have to serve in the army,
Mhm.
3 years, mandatory. Maybe it's not so much anymore, but it was back then. So my dad was a drill sergeant when he was in the military there. So he was a tough cookie to begin with, right? So I guess you have to be if you have 4 sons, right? But yeah, there. That's the thing. It's too much. How would I say? Political,
Hmm.
right? Like we're going to go with the best idea and we're going to make that our new church doctrine. Well, that's not how it works, folks. I'm sorry, right? God decides, but he allows things to happen to reach a certain point, right? And we have to wake up at that point, right? But, like Elijah, after he killed all those prophets of Baal, Jezebel, I find you, I'm going to kill you, she said, right? Well, please, God, take my life. I don't want.
Yeah.
He says, do you know there's 7,000 who haven't bent the knee to Baal?
Yeah.
He didn't know that, right? Because there's always a remnant,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So I'm not, do I actively worry about what's happening in our church? Not really. I'm frustrated with it,
Hmm.
right? Because the devil is hard at work.
Well,
And I
what
think
would you like to see happen?
I would like to see, you know, uh, I can see in a way why the Roman Catholic Church has a pope. He's the ultimate authority, but he's also human, so he'll make mistakes. Protestantism doesn't have a top dog, but each denomination has their governing body,
Yeah.
which is kind of like the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you're a governing body and you're appointed by God. That's what we believe in election bearer,
Yeah.
office bearers.
Yeah.
You govern,
Yeah.
irregardless of the noise you hear out there. That's my opinion, right? And at least the way I see it, because when you start allowing all kinds of different ideas, the truth gets lost, right? You get lost. It gets lost in it. Well, maybe Jesus meant this. Well, I've learned from a young person on that the Bible is written in such a way that the person with the lowest IQ can understand it.
Mm.
You don't need a PhD to understand it, because God gives you the ability to understand it. So that should be our first and foremost asking when we pray, please give me discernment. We pray for that at the opening of every consistory meeting. Give us discernment, right? Because I think I have the impression that people don't really think that at one point in their life they will be standing before the throne of God.
Mm.
They don't think that. What is going to be my excuse? Right? And that's the scary part. And I like to wake, people up to that. But I'm not, I have, my wife says I have no tact, and I don't. I know I'm 62 years old. I know my faults, right? I know my faults. And being tactful is not a gift I have, right? So I maybe say things that maybe should be said, but shouldn't be said, right? You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying?
I know what you're saying.
So that's the problem, hey, that I have with this, and because we were considering URC,
Mm.
and that is the probably the gist of it all. Like the denomination, we're losing our Dutchness, and is that wrong in your mind to lose your Dutchness?
I think, yeah, because of course you're old enough to remember, of course, Kuyvenhoven, I put it on my videos, time to burn the wooden shoes. And that was very controversial when that came out. And,
Yeah.
you and I were pretty young then, even. I
Sure.
mean, we were just pups. And I think now, and also, I've heard, I've had friends who were, I had another friend, his father was a Dutch immigrant, came after the war, and when they came to the United States or Canada, they would make a point to speak English because they decided they wanted to become a Canadian. They wanted to become
Absolutely.
American. And I think we're at a
Absolutely.
point now where we're just sort of trying to feel this out, because on one hand, our heritage is our heritage, and it's something that we should value. And but at the same time, and I think you said it well, we also want to welcome and affirm, other people and their heritage, because your heritage is something you receive. And with every heritage, there's good and bad, and you're going to have to sort of weigh that through.
Yeah.
But and I think, it's interesting because, of course, the Christian Reformed Church came in two waves from the Netherlands. One was sort of, up until sort of the 1910s, the First World War, and then immigration stopped, and really the next wave then came after the Second World War. And so, and of course, those settled in different places. California and Canada got a lot more of the second wave.
Yeah.
The East
Yeah.
Coast and the Midwest got more of the first wave. So I think we're still trying to figure that out, really, along with Lutherans and Presbyterians. But I think partly because the Netherlands is such a small country, and there's just not that many of us, that somehow that, and I think especially in the Christian Reformed Church, where we had both the church and the school. So like you and I also went to Christian school. Growing up, you very much had a sense of, these are our people. There's just a few of us in a much bigger land. And so we sort of have to stick together. And we value our churches and we value each other. And of course, part of valuing each other was valuing what we hold in common. And I think that's part of the reason why these years of stress and anxiety and conflict are so hard on us, because I mean, these are often quite, these are our cousins often who we are fighting with. And so it's something personal. It's not like these are total strangers. These are actually family members. And
Yep.
so it's a very difficult thing. And I appreciate, we'll have to figure out what we do with this video, but I really appreciate you coming on to share your thoughts in this, because I think part of the difficulty that we've had in the Christian Reformed Church is, just as you said at classis, there's just a few people always with the mic, and they're always the same people. And the problem with that for people like me who often have the mic is, we have one mouth and two ears. And so we really do have to listen better to each other if we're going to understand each other and understand, how we should work through these very contested times that we're living in.
Well, you're a good speaker, and you know what you're talking about. So, but I can see anyhow those that are like a popularity contest. I see that, like, there's one guy, he's always got to say something, and it's not a popular, and that,
could be a character flaw, certainly a character flaw that I
well,
have, but
we all have flaws.
we all have flaws.
But I mean, as far as voting for delegates to go to synod, it is the most well-known people that go.
Oh, really?
Like, oh yeah. The the ones, like here, my non-tactful way, the ones with the biggest mouth go.
That's often true.
Right. So, because of my upbringing is one thing, but my late teens, early 20s, and then of course trucking, going to all kinds of shady places to deliver and pick up loads, and I tend to have a little bit of callousness, right? Because I have zero time for nonsense.
Yeah.
I love these talks. I don't talk to people about, the weather's nice, what did you do last week? I don't care. When we talk stuff like this, that's meaningful to me, right?
Yeah.
Because that's a real topic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know if I could even enter the U.S. anymore. Like, I didn't want to tell you this, but your area has a bad taste in my mouth. Because I used to drive. We had a contract with Sunny Delight Juice out of Anaheim. So I was there every week picking up a load out of Anaheim. But we would normally bring loads of peat moss into Northern California, right, for all the greenhouses and horticulture places and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But they have, like, the truckers call California the communist state. And they do that for a reason, right? Because they have kind of funny laws. So as a result of that, I had accrued a few tickets, which I never paid. Because no, I'm kind of that way. If I feel that I've earned that ticket, and because every other place has the same law, but California has a different law, like being in the third lane as a big truck.
Yeah.
That's a ticket. And a guy on a motorbike, police stopped me at 2:00 in the morning. There's not a soul in the road. And I was passing two very heavy trucks that were going up a hill, and I was empty. So I just flew around. I was in that third lane for 3 seconds.
Yeah.
Got a ticket.
That seems a little ridiculous.
Right. So
it would seem the safest thing to do for you would be to get out of there and not have some big line of trucks back down the road.
They're wasting my time.
Yeah.
Right. because I got places I have to be,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And sleep is very important.
Yeah.
So if somebody's cutting into your sleep,
Yeah.
you get irate,
Yeah.
right?
That's true. That's true.
So yeah, but I mean, you know, I don't think, you know, the funny thing is, before, and I hope I didn't ruffle feathers, because I definitely had a sincere prayer before we got on, to watch my tongue.
I don't
Right.
think you said anything inappropriate. I think you spoke your mind. I think you did it clearly. And it's a difficult thing. We ought to be considerate of each other's emotions, but at
Sure.
the same time, we should also try to find, I mean, the Bible says speak the truth in love. And so there's always that balance between, well, if I speak the truth, I might say something that you don't necessarily agree with and you might not like it. But I mean, part of the thing is we all as human beings have to deal with things we like and things we don't like. And if you
Sure.
never learn to deal
Sure.
with things you don't like or disagree with, it's kind of hard to function in this world because there's
Sure.
plenty we disagree with or don't like. So
Yeah.
I've enjoyed talking to you.
Yeah.
I
Well, I did too. I love these types of conversations. And I know there's other people, certainly in our consistory, that have the same mind as me,
No, I'm sure there are.
you know, so that's refreshing. And, conservative is all about not changing,
Yeah.
right? And change scares them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And change scares me. What I've seen in the last bunch of years, we're not headed down a good path,
Yeah.
right? So hopefully, it will run its course. Like God will always have His church. There's nobody. The devil does not have any rule over it,
Yeah.
right? So it will always be there.
Yeah.
And do we have to worry about church attendance? You know, um, oh, our church pews are getting empty.
Hmm.
Is that an issue, really? Our church is paid for.
Yeah. 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 I'm more concerned with, I mean, like in our church, probably the struggle is our church is paid for too. The struggle is having enough elders and deacons
Yeah,
to continue and having enough hands to do the work. That tends to be more of the struggle.
yeah,
Because a church can get by on very little money, but you need the hands to do the work.
that's
And
right.
that tends to be the tougher thing. So
Yeah,
well, Neil, I've enjoyed speaking with you, and I appreciate you
yeah,
contacting me and sharing your opinion. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you this video, and you can watch it. And if you would like me to share it on my channel, I'd be willing to, because I mean, I didn't set out to get a big YouTube channel. My channel isn't really that big. It just sort of happened.
yeah,
But one of
yeah,
the things that I do care about is that I think it's hard for people in the Christian Reformed Church to hear each other right now.
correct.
And so I appreciate people. I like having people from the Christian Reformed Church on the channel to just share who they are and what their perspectives are, because part of what I was at Synod 2022,
Yeah,
and then I watched Synod 2023, and part of what I was dismayed by is that I think that in my classes, I see like urban churches and rural churches, and I've tried very hard to listen to everyone to at least try to understand them. Of course, we all have our own opinions, but at least if we can sort of see each other and understand each other, then hopefully we can, try to work together or try to at least do well by each other. And so
yeah,
that's a goal of mine. And so then I think hearing from each other is really important. And so there have been different people who have come on my channel and talked about different issues, and their perspectives are different. But I think it's important that the both sides listen to and understand each other, because if you can't understand each other, you can't decide how to make plans together, or at least how even to live together. So I think that
yeah.
level of understanding is really crucial. So
Well, that's the difficult part, is what do you have to give up to save the peace,
yeah, yeah,
right? And what are you willing to give up? And LGBTQ, it's in my family, in my broader family, there's a gay person.
Yeah.
And, you know, I know it really hurt my dad. You know, it hurts me too. And he's professing member, right? So his shadow hasn't graced a church door in 35 years or so because he knows, right?
Yeah.
But he's unable to stop it. But does that mean he's forever condemned? No. God can save him anytime he wants. And that's the beauty of it. Our God is so powerful. You know, if you're called, you're called.
Yeah. Yeah.
Irresistible grace.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that's the gist of it for me. Like, I'm actually surprised that I haven't shed a tear yet, because normally when I have these conversations, I shed tears,
Oh, that's okay.
right? Because I'm an emotional person. That's
Yeah.
obvious, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. Well, hopefully everything goes well for you, Paul. And I really enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully, you know, people know there are dinosaurs like me out there.
Well, I wouldn't call you a dinosaur. I wouldn't call you a dinosaur. We're not that old. I mean,
Yeah.
we're not really that old. We're still walking around. We, you know, hopefully the Lord will keep us around a little while longer, and we'll be able to continue to serve His church. So, I
Well, you
will.
know, Christmas service, we still sing Iris Echot,
Yeah, I
right?
believe
Glory
it.
to God.
That's
We
right.
still sing it in Dutch,
Yeah.
right?
All right, so
So
I'm going to send you a link to this.
perfect.
You watch it, and if you're in favor of me sharing it, you let me know,
Sure.
and then I'll put this out, and it'll be just another part of the ongoing conversation in the Christian Reformed Church.
Sure. Sounds good.
All right.
Sounds
Thank
good.
you, Neil.
Thanks a lot, Paul.
God
Take
bless
care
you.
now.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.